Yo, yo, yo. Pretty sure you can hear me. Word. Just waiting for that text confirmation. I should say like holla if you hear me. Hold up. All right. What's up? Shut down. Just disclose Disco Brick for a bit. All right, so I'm gonna be talking about some synthesis shit today. I also got VCV Rack open. All right, so like if you have VCV Rack, definitely just like open it up, kind of follow along. And yeah, definitely if you're trying to follow along, it'd be super good if you went and downloaded that little course guide I put in there, because all those like key terms and shit, it's like I could go one by one with all that, but I feel like I'm just gonna like really touch on a few of them and then kind of like make a point of like know this, and you know, just kind of like highlighting a few points. I actually should open that. Actually made this on my laptop today. Oh yeah, and definitely for these patches, I just dropped them in. So some of them, I checked them, and they had like the output set to like bridge. So you just have to like set that to your interface or whatever. And I'm gonna show you how to like set up patches in VCV Rack and all that shit, but also might open up some Ableton stuff as well. Because right now for my mic, I'm actually using Ableton, and the VCV Rack is just open. All right. It's so white. That's better. All right, so this is pretty much what I'm gonna like go through today, and like the big thing is this, like, so like I don't really want to go too much in depth on like specific like how to make this kind of crazy shit. Like when I make Reese, it's kind of like a certain process, and then I go a different direction every single time. So you know, this is kind of like, for me, this is my basic types and where I start when I make a lot of stuff, like for basses, leads, chords, pads, drums, and effects. The drums are probably, you know, maybe a couple weeks long just on that shit, because there's a ton of ways to make a drum. Yeah, so like the key points up here, like attenuation, all that stuff. Pretty much like, I won't be like saying like really crazy shit all the time and just like be throwing out big words. But this is really just for more like you when you're going through a synth, or like if you're trying to get into modular shit at all, they're going to be referring to stuff as this. For this is just kind of like another thing that helps you kind of wrap your mind around where things should go when you're building a synth, first and second order. So first order, you know, this is kind of like the big thing that I want to talk about. You know, because these should be kind of a given. Attenuation means just moving a parameter. Modulation, modulator. But first and second order, that's kind of like the big thing that, like, if you're going to be making a patch, I'm actually going to put this in the same window here. I got the Basquiat background. Keeps me vibing, bro. Always keep that Basquiat, however you want to say it. I don't care. Yeah. So like first order modulators, to just kind of like cover what that means. Like that means the baseline modulators that make the synth work, and pretty much are the backbone of the synth, you know, stemming from MIDI. And so when you're even working with just like operator or whatever, say if you wanted to make your own synth in Max or whatever, because that's definitely how operator was built. So yeah, you could make your own operator if you want. Make it a like 8 oscillator, kind of like FM8. You can put a FM matrix in there. Nah, I kind of want to do that. But yeah, so you know, first order things in terms of modulation would be your MIDI CV, because these are modulating the thing that is making your sound, which is pitch and gate going into your envelope and your amp. So like that's pretty much what this means. So something that's predestined or created in the default functionality of a synth or audio. So what that means with audio, because I'm going to be kind of talking about that when I get into like saturation. And saturation's like a huge thing, and that's like a little bit more advanced. Just to kind of like get you up to speed if you're going to be following along with what I'm going to be showing. It's kind of like crucial that you kind of know that, because that's kind of the easiest way for me to explain it. So when I'm talking about audio, that means, it's right here. Original set of harmonics. So if I'm going to saturate anything, any harmonics generated by the saturation will now be second order harmonics. So you can talk about first order modulation, first order components, and then first order harmonics. So this is all like the initial thing. That's pretty much like first order, and all those definitions kind of really signifies the same thing. So yeah, it's just kind of like to wrap your understanding around things. Trying to wrap your head around it. Okay, so second order, something that is not predestined or created in the default functionality of a synth or audio. So new modulation, set of components, oscillator, filter, routing, and then new harmonics. So I kind of like included all the other things in there, along with modulation. But that's really all blanketed under components, because that's like, if you're going to be reading a book, which like I recommended down here, that's going to be the easiest way to understand those books and really get the most out of it. I've read a couple of those. There's ways you can find ebooks, they're kind of expensive because they're college books, but they're definitely worth it because they're actually pretty good if you're trying to really get into like engineering. Okay, so like just going back to the rack here, talking about modulation, MIDI CV is the first thing. Components, first order component inside of a synth, say like Serum or whatever, any synth. That would be the oscillators that it has, and you cannot change those oscillators. So first order component of a synth like that would be that oscillator, and you can just change it into a lot of different things, but it's really optimized for that. So modular doesn't really have anything that's like that. So say if you were trying to build something in modular, in VCV Rack, you can build whatever you want. You're not limited by money. That's the biggest thing, to kind of wrap your head around modular, because, hardware modular is, a million times better. And there's a lot of shit made by a lot of really good companies. So it's definitely good to be good before you go and jump into something that's a big investment. So like talking about modulators again, this is the first in line with the first order modulators. This would be the second, because that's the envelope. So that's really like the main, two modulators in the first order line. So that's why this is the basic patch in VCV Rack, because it's already set up to be like a synth. And so like, if you're going to be starting a patch or something like that, it makes it really hard for you to kind of like wrap your head around it if you really don't know where to start. So, you just got to like know the basic components, and then you say, all right, well, can I times the first piece by like 50? In VCV Rack, you can do that. Or you can be like dead mouse and be like, oh, I'm gonna buy 50 of a fucking $10,000 module. I'll fill out a fucking wall with it. And then I'll make a fucking cord stab with it once a year. Yeah. probably more than that. But whatever. Yeah, so like this has to be hooked up to everything in order for it to kind of like move and respond to like keyboard strokes. I'm gonna hook this up. Alright, so you should be able to hear that. Can I get a, yeah, I can hear that in the chat. Weird. Alright. Alright, so in your basic synth patch, these are going to be the main things, but I also kind of like lay out pretty plainly what it can be. And that's down here, because I'm going to talk about all the types of stuff. So LFO for vibrato only, really, unless it's semi-modular with limited or full matrix, then LFO can be pre-patched to amp and filter as well. And I've seen that on a bunch of like soft synths. And it just has an amount, and you just have to turn up that amount. So that's something I'll look out for if you're just using a soft synth, and then you're just like, oh, I'm going to put LFO on the filter. And they're just an amount knob, instead of having to go into a mod matrix or something like that. And then anything with Eurorack or VCV rack that has a knob directly hooked up to a function will be referred to one as a first order modulator. Kind of what I'm saying right here, where like if this is the first order component being like the main sound maker, and then where's my MIDI coming from and where's my envelope that's hooked up to my amp going to, these are all my first order things. So like I'm not like saying that all the time, and just in my mind when I'm thinking about how it works to keep it all in order, I usually start from there. Alright, so second order, you know, it is easier to grasp what this is because pretty much anything that you go and like modulate, say with like massive or whatever, and keep on forgetting to like authorize my serum on here. Oof. Whoops. F. So I haven't loaded up massive in so long. Alright, so like saying massive here, just kind of like take a step back in time. First order modulator here would be number 4, because that's hooked up to the amp, and there's nothing else hooked up because it wants to be modular. So that makes everything that you go and hook up here a second order modulator. So I like this as an example because this is where it all started. Like if Serum had like a template, it was this. But it's not just Serum, it's also every other soft synth post-massive. So this really set the bar for like how a synth should be controlled and how it should be like user-friendly. Because this allows me to know nothing and just start dragging and dropping and just know that this does something. But then when I wanted to actually do something else cool, what the fuck does that triangle mean? And what's that mean? You know, so that's where knowing what that does comes in handy. And that's all like more second order modulation. Go back to it. Just kind of touch on that. That's actually sidechain modulation. So you can modulate the range of modulators with that. And that in Serum is called auxiliary modulation. And that in here can go and create a VCA and scale the incoming signal with something, and then scale that VCA again, and then modulate that signal. So auxiliary modulation really doesn't have a big limit in here. So that's another second order modulator, which is huge. But then there's a ton of other types. So not only, just having mod envelopes and LFOs, because that's kind of like your main food groups, and that's what you'll kind of recognize as like, what are the modulators to do like crazy stuff with, not just your basic, like this is how the synth works modulators. Like this is a sequencer, randomizer, K-oscillators. You got a bunch of those in VCV rack to like randomize waveforms and oscillators, slew limiters. To explain what that does right now is a little bit much. It just kind of filters the input. It's really cool. Steppers, and that's kind of like a sequencer, but it's a kind of value CV sequencer. Both can be used for the same thing, but others have certain kind of specialties. Scale quantization. That's another modulator that you can use to quantize pretty much the scale of any frequency-based signal. So when I talk about that more, I'll use absinthe as an example, because you can quantize filter modulation with grain clouds, and it will tune an entire grain cloud into like major ninth chords, which is super nice. And then logic filtering, that's really complicated, but exists largely in here, and in Eurorack, like huge. So that's like filtering different types of signals into other, types of signals. So it's kind of like using math. And then I kind of like talk about that right here, where I say unipolarity and bipolarity. So like rectifier, where that, like if a rectifier, if you send a signal through a rectifier, it will make the signal only positive values. So that's kind of like a big thing to know about that. Yeah. So when you get into modular though, you can really just do anything. So Reactor, VCV Rack now too, they have their own scripting module where you don't have to like build it. And I think forget what environment they were scripting before, but now it's just all in here. And then with Max 2, that's really unlimited kind of scripting. And if you're gonna really get into like deep modulation there, that's like, I think I've given this example at some point, but like with Max, you can, create modulators that trigger different things to alert people, with apps and all that other shit, because it's just like, say if like somebody triggered an alarm or something, you could actually like use Max for that too. I've heard it being used for like apps for blind people as well, to like help get around the house. It's all just based on impulse responses. So that's, kind of back to the modulator being MIDI. MIDI being the first modulator, like, out of all of them. Because you can, like, filter that MIDI in a bunch of different ways, or get it from different things. Because when I'm looking at MIDI right here, MIDI has 127 different signals it's carrying at once. So that's all the different channels in that MIDI. Like if you go to live, well, I can't get to it right now, but yeah, you can pretty much find any of the expression pedal things and all that shit, but there's a ton of them. Trust me. I don't feel like digging for it. Alright. So I just kind of want to get through this so I can like build some sounds. Yeah, so this other stuff here, I'm going to be coming back to this. I just really wanted to make it a thing to like really explain it prior, apply it, and then I'm going to rehash it, you know, just so you can see it like 3 times at least. That's how I understand shit. So all this stuff here should be kind of just like me just defining terms for you. That's not even anything. Cutoff, you should know what that is. Bandwidth, that changes the size of a filter. Range, you know, that's going to be determine limit of modulation. So when I say range of modulation, it's, you know, that amount in massive that I like highlighted. That's the range. That little blue guy. All right, cool. All right, so now these are a little bit more like deeper. So unipolar, again, to just say modulation range with only positive values or one set. So you could, you know, get unipolar and shift it, change it, add it, give it different values, but have it be only going one direction. So it's not limited to only positive values. You could shift it. Or even reverse the polarity of a unipolar thing, so it goes only negative values. So bipolar means positive and negative values. Also applies to waveform analysis. So when talking about saturation and getting into like what wave shaping does, because that's like, I've spent a lot of time just like really dissecting that for myself, and you know, I really like using wave shapers, but understanding what one does is kind of a really complex and deep thing, because you need to understand polarity, how a waveform works, and also bit depth. So it's a few things, but then also just, you know, fucking around with it. But if you're going to make something really methodical with like a bunch of different points of sine wave modulation on a curve, yeah, it's a little bit easier to kind of know what you're doing with it. So zero crossing DC, that's something I've talked about before, but you know, that's just the point, the zero value that separates modulation or waveforms into positive and negative values. So that's the point where the waveform meets zero. All right, definitely talked about mod matrix, so that shouldn't be anything. All right, so like now, like all the filter types should be kind of basic: low pass, high pass, band pass. So you know, your quiz is going to definitely be something that's really done with one of these. But you know, if you're looking at a bunch of modular stuff, it's good to know a couple more of these. So notch filters and band rejects are the same thing. Some notch filters subtract all the way down to infinity, whereas band rejects sometimes don't. Like if you're going to use the notch in the auto filter, that subtracts down to infinity. State variable, that's the way autofilter works, and volcano, and Serum's filter. So those are all state variables, but the amount of states it can change into is a huge list. It's not just like 4 or 5, which used to be only these guys. It's like a bunch of different combinations of that. Multi-mode filters are more filters. Allow you to blend in between a bunch of different filter types with just one modulation range. And those are pretty cool. I use a bunch of max ones that are really cool, and get a lot of like ASA and Sorrow kind of like shit with it, and like make a lot of garage with that kind of shit. That's really a lot of my favorite kind of modulation for narrow sounds, is multi-mode filters and a lot of sine wave modulation and then refiltering, then recompressing, all that shit. All right, so comb filters and multiple phasers, those are kind of similar. Comb filter, that, you know, should be kind of simple as well, rehashing something. So signal fed back onto itself with the delay amp, filter module, I missed that one. Feedback in the chain. So these you can actually build, but that's just how any comb filter works. So when you see the damp knob, that's really controlling a low pass filter that's in this feedback loop chain. And all you got to do is create a little bit of delay. So you just put delay on the channel itself, and then offset it, and then run it back through a filter. So it's 2 stages of filtering, and it's refiltering a copy of itself. And so that creates this crazy feedback loop. And that's how the comb filters work. So pretty much every filter in Serum that has like HP whatever, or comb H6 plus, you know, that means a high pass filter at neg 6 dB per octave. So when I say slope, that's what that means. Descending at neg 6 dB per octave. Really light. So that's what that means. And then negative, positive values will give you like big difference in the actual like sound. So if you want to sound like a saw, positive, negative, more like a square. So easy to discern that. And then all you got to do is turn on keyboard tracking and then tune it to the fundamental. And then it's just doing its thing. All right, so multiple phasers, they're kind of like the same thing, but they're actually, you know, multi-peak filters, but it also has a feedback loop involved with that. So it's feeding back the same signal to itself, you know, and then re-peak filtering. So it's creating this like really, really modulated kind of like sine wave sound. And then those can be modulated. So you can have multiple amounts of pulls, as many pulls as you want. I got pulls for days. And flanger chorusing, really similar to the way a comb filter works, but it has a modulator in the actual chain. So comb filtering does not, a flanger does. So equalizers, those are the most used filters. Those are pretty much peak filters that can go in positive and negative values. They have variable slope ranges and Q focuses. So I use this for all 3 of these. So filter bank, spectral filtering, FFT, that's probably the most advanced form of filtering and the coolest. So you can make really cool sounds with this. That's like with multi-instruments and RX, Iris, Reactor, Max, Kima. So that's definitely like just an example. Please do not go and buy a Kima. High key, never buy that shit. If you got enough money to spend on a Kima system, go buy a fucking Eurorack, bro. Alright, so vocoders, that's another thing that I use as like in place of a filter a lot, especially on Ableton in my chain with like big neuro sounds and respaces and stuff, and I'm sure you've seen that in some of my videos already of me doing some shit like that. So you can use that with like Razor. Razor's another really cool one. You can do that with, you can use Razor as a vocoder. Vocoder's Ableton's vocoder. vocodecs in FL Studio is super good as well, and the mouth, that one's alright. Not that good. And there's a bunch of random vocoders in VCV Rack. Convolution, that's another filter that people don't think about, which is kind of like spectral filtering as well. It's a more fine version of spectral filtering. So if I was going to compare these two right now, just to kind of like tie these both together for your understanding, spectral filtering and Iris, yeah, just open up Iris here. Keep on doing that. Straight to the accordion sound. That's my go-to. No. Alright, so a spectral filter would be like this. Being able to draw on the spectrum. And what this is really doing is it's creating a filter, but that filter follows pitch and time, pretty much. So it's a filter kind of locked on a sampler. So you can kind of do the same thing with Reactor. If I can just show that really quick. There's this old Reactor effect called the Animus. I really like that one. Let's see. Effects or Anima. Alright, so this is a spectral filter. So it has modulation, and you can focus where that modulation is. So it sounds pretty cool. I can give a little demo of that in a bit. Alright, so convolution, just to tie it back to that, you can use like convolution as another point in your first order modulation chain. Like say if you're going to make a car plus strong type of like physical modeled sound, you would put like a whole surface kind of engine here. You can add on top of it like the actual convolution of say like a stringed body, which is like cello or anything like that. And when you actually use tension, so right here where it says body, this is kind of a lightweight little convolution. They have different noise profiles. So this is a filter. It's filtering the sound as it goes through it. And then when you filter this really excited noise-based sound that if you're not careful with this one, it'll like blow your face off. So careful with tension. It's a really good one though. Yeah, so this can kind of like color the body that you're going for. Then they have different sizes for the body. So Corpus is kind of the same thing, but it's really just more of a kind of like a filter bank, I would say. Because you have a certain amount of partials in here, and they're all really, really high resonant. So you can take one of these like active filter banks and over resonate each of these little peaks, and this is like super low res, you know, but look at these, look at this shit, look at this shit, look at how old you are, look at this boomer instrument right here. So say if you took each one of these little like peaks in here, and you can do the same thing with like a vocoder, pull the bandwidth down and then change the range of the kind of like filter for the incoming signal, that'll change like a whole format of sound, as opposed to just like a, you know, regular high pass. So kind of tie that back again, I'm modulating this bandwidth. So if I go at 10% of sides, it's going to be really, really, really small. So it's going to sound pretty much like a filter bank, and it'll sound like a bunch of random dissonant sine waves, similar to the way corpus can sound. But corpus also has a string of delays inside of it, and a bunch of comb filtering, and then modulation for that comb filtering. Hence why it's called corpus, because it's the carpless chorus. If you're ever wondering why it was named corpus, I have debunked the name. Alright, so now the final two types, and then I'm going to get into using shit. So ladder filter and low pass gate. So these two things are, you know, really native to modular shit, more so than synthesizer, unless you're using Reason. And Thor definitely has a bunch of ladder filter stuffs. So you can find some of that in there. And there's also a bunch of emulations in Serum as well. And Autofilter has ladder filter emulations now as well. So they're all over the place. But pretty much what it means is, you know, it's like the original naming for this type of filter, but it had, it's a combination of a VCF and a VCO, which is a sine wave oscillator as its VCO. So a VCF is a voltage controlled filter, and oscillator, voltage. So it's used to control the resonance and cutoff. So you pretty much use the oscillator to control the cutoff itself. And then there's an amp inside of there to push up the actual sine wave to give it more volume. And that creates an over resonance. And they call it self-oscillating. So ladder filters are self-oscillating filters. Software examples, Volcano, Volt Tangents, and that's a really good one I like in VCV Rec. They actually just made this into a hardware module. It's so good. Yeah, so you can make a lot of really cool sounds with that. It's really good for sub basses and making like Moog kind of sounds. For trying to get in that kind of shit, bro. Trying to make some Moog shit. Alright, so now low pass gate is a little bit different, but it's of the same kind of like era. So you got Moog and you got Buchla. So it's like East Coast versus West Coast. Buchla is the Don. Buchla's the boy. I stand Buchla over whatever that is. So this combines the VCF and VCA. So when the low pass gate is opened, not only is the cutoff being attenuated, but the amplitude is also being changed. So it makes for very rich overtones due to the saturation added during the gain staging of the VCA. So louder equals more higher harmonics, but also saturation creating more harmonics. So this creates second order harmonics in the gate. So like Buchla stuff is really good for that. They have some surge modules, if you know what surge is. And those are Eurorack things that are really good for that kind of stuff, and they're like Buchla type modules, and they have a bunch of stuff like that. But other examples are, you know, Buchla, and then Pittsburgh Modular Impulse. That one sounds super good. In a lot of my new tracks, I have like a bunch of shit I like recorded through that, and just really good, just for like ping. So that's another thing that these get is ping. So on top of it having, you know, VCF and VCA, you know, it still has something powering it. So that creates a really, really high resonant tone with this impulse, because impulse kind of combines both. And when you're working with the Buchla, like emulation and Artura, you cannot control resonance, but an impulse you can, and it just gets pretty gnarly when you're making like drum sounds. So with drum sounds, low pass gates are like really, really good. And then make noise mats. And that one's pretty good. It's probably the most advertised out of all of them. But the Pittsburgh modular one, that one's super good. It's just a really small module though. And they have a bunch of them like that in VCV Rack too. I think Mats is a little bit too much, but it's also good. You know, I'm not talking shit about Mats too hard. All right, so let's get into it now, because we're gonna start talking about modulation and, you know, all the rest of this shit. So this should be pretty self-explanatory. You really shouldn't have to go too deep into this. Attack, decay, sustain, release. You know, ADSR right here. But just because you're seeing ADSR here doesn't mean it's going to be limited to that in the soft synth realm, because you can have all of these different types. So when I say ADSR, D stands for the same thing in all these. So decay, attack, release, attack, decay, release. And those are actually pretty common in some like older synths like the Juno 60 or I think the DX7 also has a bunch of like attack, decay envelopes as well. So this is really good for like, you know, if you push the decay all the way up, then it's pretty much a sustain. You know, so they just have less stages because they have less room for stuff. Or you have some type of multi-point timeline. And that's like the biggest thing of using a soft synth is you can go and draw in as many waypoint or breakpoints as you want. Say in, you know, Serum, you can do that. And then curve each line pretty much. Yeah. And then next week I'm going to talk about voice engines and how to make like really big sounds and, you know, how to kind of maximize the most out of like your oscillators and stuff, and kind of really go in depth on like analog waveform synthesis. That's pretty much going to be the focus of that. We're going to start talking about the different oscillator types and that kind of stuff. So it's just going to be more sound creation. You know, just got to set the platform for terminology and all this shit, so you kind of like have a reference to come back to, instead of me just linking you a bunch of random shit. This is a conglomeration of literally just me stream of consciousness writing whatever I think should be learned. So we're gonna get into this now. So let's start making some sounds. Shift this to a lower octave. Alright, so in modular synth realm, or world, you know, there's a bunch of different types of patches, and I definitely lay them out inside of that outline here. So I'm going to start with basses. So I didn't include drones, but I guess you can call that a pad / bass. So I want to talk about that really quick, because that's actually kind of the best place to start. If you can understand how to make a drone, then you can understand how to use modular synthesis. So the point is to kind of like encourage people to use modular synthesis as opposed to being trapped inside of their DAW. You know, whatever DAW it is, doesn't matter, Ableton, FL, Logic, Cubase, whatever. You know, this is kind of like the thing that exists in hardware. You know, you have all the functionality of it. Blocks is super cool. You know, you can do a lot of stuff with blocks. And I have the full blocks set up. but I like this more. So, all right. So when making a drone, I want this thing to just fly without any control. I just want it to be opening and just moving around with some type of modulator. So in order to understand how to make a drone, you need to understand what are the original parts. You know, this is going to be, you know, kind of like the core thing to, you know, get sound out correctly and make it move around in a way that's like really interesting. You can record, you know, an hour-long modulating kind of sound. You know, make huge soundscapes or make huge Reese patches, you know, that are going to be like 1 second of like that 40-minute sample, you know, that's going to like make your album super good, you know, that's kind of shit. So that's what I do on a lot of my stuff, and that's kind of like where it comes from. Alright, so you just want it to be free flowing. That means I take out MIDI control. So I actually don't even really want this. So I can have something else like a sequencer and you know, some other modulator to move around the pitch of this sound. Alright, so if I want to get more than one oscillator in here, I can Command D. Hold down Command, you can nudge these modules left and right, make more space. That's brand new. So if I want to send both of these oscillators into this filter, I just need a mixer. So I Command D that, grab that, move it over here. I'm going to put both of these sawtooths in one mixer. And I like to use the audible instrument shit over everything. But just for now, we're going to keep it to only a couple of these modules. I really like both of these. Quad VCA and Quad VC polarizer. That changes the polarity of the incoming signal. And those are the hardware module versions, are veils and blinds. Super good. Alright, so this is marbles, or a random sampler. That's what it's called, random sampler. So this accepts a clock input. So back to what MIDI stands for. Triggering notes, hooking it up to an actual like you know, timeline, some kind of DAW. So a DAW, this is clock. This is telling the DAW 120 BPMs per min, bruv. So I want to tell this bruv how many mins per beat. How many of those BPMs? Just type in BPM. BPM clock. Alright, so this one is a free module. You can go get it AS. And if you're going to open up any of my patches, I'm pretty sure it will have you download all of the different modules that I've used. And I use a lot of different ones for my patches, and they're pretty complex. So, you know, and they're just a lot of big Reese ones. You know, I'm probably, you know, losing money giving you guys all that shit. No, I'm just kidding. But they're really good patches, actually. And a lot of the Reese patches I play, you know, and like my intro shit are made from some of those patches. Okay, so BPM clock. This is my DAW. This is telling it how many BPMs per min. Say, give me 174 BPMs. Make some drum and bass. So I need a quarter note. So beat. So I need the beat clock. These are different subdivisions. So I can get a few of these, and I can run one at a different time division to get different, you know, timelines going. And I could probably do that on stream now. with my computer, but it's a little bit hard. So I would run everything at pretty low or pretty high buffer size. So my shit definitely would break down. But when you're recording it, you can definitely save a lot of stuff. It doesn't actually record a lot of the clicks and pops, or else I'd be fucked. For real, for real, for real. That is crucial. Alright, so you just hook that up right here. That's it. So now this is sunk to 174, and I'll take a couple taps. So this is just a tap to tempo thing. That's all it's doing. And I can change the time signature if I want to get crazy. I want to get crazy, man. I can go 7/8. 14/8. Alright, so pretty much I'm gonna like explain how this works right now. So these are a bunch of different sets of possible different loops, and it kind of like randomizes through those. You can catch some of them by hitting the deja vu thing right here, and you can actually mix in between two different sets of that like captured loop, and then you can scale that loop once you've captured it. So that loop contains 3 types of information. This Y one really doesn't do that much, but we got T, 1, 2, and 3, and those are triggers. So I can trigger things at pretty much just quarter notes, which would be like a hi-hat. So I can get a full rig going on, make some like techno or whatever, and just like trigger individual envelopes. Instead of with MIDI, I can trigger it with a sampler I don't have to control, and that's really the big thing with modular, is you're just patching stuff in, you're not thinking really. You know what the things do, but you're experimenting by trying different outputs because you know what information comes out there. And that's really the big thing. Okay, so now X2, X1, 2, and 3, those are voltage information. So that can be used as CV value or pitch value. So I'm going to actually use that as pitch value here. I'm actually going to do something first. So I'm going to go back to my little library. So you probably want to get 21 kilohertz because this is something I use in pretty much all my patches. Just because it's like a huge part of my workflow with this, because it's just so simple, you know. So if I want to go and just take this information and say I have this really, you know, by the seat of its pants frequency knob, no quantization, just flying out there. Yo, this guy goes raw, man. So if I want to like wrangle that rawness in a little bit, you know, put, you know, one of these pitch modules in so I can just shift it up and down an octave. I can get 2 of those. Actually, patch them correctly here. Alright, so now I have control of the pitch. That's something I like. So definitely want that. So now that I have both these patched, I'm sending pitch information. I'm not triggering any envelopes yet. But now I can trigger envelopes with this little trigger module down here. I'm going to go deeper into like all the shit you can do with this too. This gets really random. If there's anything just to twist knobs in, this is the one. Zach and I, other half of HFO, Zachary Countryman, we like this is where I kind of like learned some of this stuff. You know, he's definitely like a wealth of modular knowledge and shit. and he has a bunch of these modules IRL. So, you know, using them a bunch, you know, just was like, damn, I really want to use that shit. And then when I found VCV Rec about a year and a half ago now, yeah, I've been kind of raving about it. Everybody's like, yo, shut the fuck up, bro. So that's everybody in my mind. Hey, bro, shut the fuck up. No one gives a fuck, bro. I use my fucking serum patches, dude. I got my serum patches, it's fine, bro. Alright, so I just literally messed around with it for like 2 seconds and got something kind of cool. So that's how easy this shit is. It should really be that easy. You shouldn't really have to think about it more than that. It's like, oh, what's going to control all this stuff? You know, that's why it's really important to know all this stuff when walking into like the fucking devil's playground. Yeah, because this shit gets crazy. You can do so much stuff in modular land, and honestly, VCV Rack is the best form I've seen so far. And I'm like, you know, I can make synths and all that kind of shit in Reactor, and I've been doing that shit, I guess, for about 8-9 years I've been building synths in Reactor. So, you know, I guess I can say I'm pretty well versed in it, and I've been around the block a couple times, especially with Max too. I built a lot of stuff with that. Scripted things, and you know, there's a lot of things you can do with it, you know, and if you just like know how this shit works, you can really see different avenues of how to experiment and like really try new shit and find really crazy sounds. So it's kind of the point. Alright, so talking about modulation here. So this is all first order modulation, right? What I'm doing. This is the backbone of this sound. So the backbone is the pitch right now. And then we have transient movement. So like, I can get this ADSR and I can send this here. Alright, so now my envelope that was pretty much controlling just my filter and my amplitude is now being triggered by this. So I can speed it up, move it around, it's all going to respond to that. I don't have to do anything to this. So notice how all of these knobs have a little line going down to this hole. That means you can accept information from anything that can output something and send that somewhere. So if I wanted to take this oscillator's output and patch it right here, I can do that. You know? And maybe that would sound crazy. Or it wouldn't really do much. Alright, so in modulator you can get like super experimental, you know, just because you're being random with it and you know that this does something, this does something, I want to go and change it with some type of signal. This is really not the best patch. It could get some really crazy shit, but it's running at really high rates, so it's gonna really not catch anything. So, you know, that's another thing to know, you know. When some type of modulator source is not actually good, because I know that this actually needs like a couple taps in order to actually accept information. So something moving really fast, it's actually going to sound like it's standing completely still because it's not really changing at all. So, you can just be plugging shit in, it's like really not doing anything. So you got to be able to recognize that as well. And then recognize things that react immediately. Like this right here. So this is step smoothness. So this is glide in between each step. So just to kind of like talk a little bit more about what this module does. So rate of the sequencer. It has a certain set of scales. So you can right click and you can actually change some of these orderings around. And then your Y is just a straight up kind of like a sine wave modulator. So just kind of going up and down. Chord note. So there's a lot of functions like that in VCV Rec, and you can really like kind of maximize the kind of usefulness of this shit. All right, so right here, output voltage range mode. So this is a different set of ranges. So red is going to be large range, and with a lot of the audible instruments or mutable instruments stuff, that's pretty much what those colors mean. So this is trigger mode. So these change how the triggers are going to be triggering. So green is kind of like a hip hop mode. Same thing with yellow. It's kind of the alternate version of that. They're kind of like two different speeds. And then red can get really fast and kind of like really crazy. But they're all going to be different kind of like rhythm types. Okay, so this was trigger types. This is going to be different rates as well. So when you go direct here plus this, you can get really interesting stuff. So it even has like a little kind of indicator right here. Times 4, I think that says. And then these are different octave ranges. So I think it's plus and minus 5 octaves. Then this one's interesting. It kind of changes the spread probability distribution, which is, in really terming terms, that means possible different notes. So this one is a cool one to modulate. This one's a cool one to modulate. And these buttons are cool to push. At the end of the day, that's really all I'm saying. All right, so pretty much across the board though. Green means, gentle. Red means, whoa, abort. All right, so now I can hook up a bunch of other stuff in here. I'm gonna talk about like LFOs and stuff. And I might kind of introduce like a curl patch kind of thing. And then a couple different other patches from that outline I shared in my Discord. Let me reset this first. So I was on 21 kilohertz. There's a bunch of different LFOs in here. So let's choose one that's kind of basic. This one is actually pretty basic, but let's just go with the VCV one for now. Alright, so low frequency oscillator, LFO, should be pretty self-explanatory. Low frequency. So its range doesn't really go higher than, in this case it goes up to 1K, which is a lot. But most soft synths do not go above 500 hertz. And so that's something to keep in mind. This is also not sunk. So a lot of other soft synth LFOs have sync. And I really like this other company, Frozen Wasteland, for this functionality alone. So BPM LFO. So here's another thing that you need no clock for. So use patch clock into the BPM clock. And now this is sunk to 174. So now I can move stuff around at that BPM. So this has a multiplier. Changes the speed. I can patch something into that. Say something that's not sunk. Have it move slowly over time. So I can kind of randomize a lot of stuff by syncing up sunk values with unsunk values. Alright, so that's just an example for now. It's gonna get crazy. Alright, so a lot of different LFOs have like crazy shapes you can draw in and stuff, and that's one of the big things about Serum I really like. And here you just have a lot of different possible modulation types. I think there's a few that you can actually like kind of create some different shapes with. This is actually a really good one. Lisa G LFO. I think I was talking to Billion about this for a bit. He's really about this shit. Billion's about a lot of crazy shit though. He's on his own plane of existence in a lot of ways. So these ones are really cool. So that's another kind of random one. So I would substitute these two instead of this when I would be building a patch. And a lot of the patches that I actually have in that folder are using this. So yeah, exactly, Johnny. So like this is how you make like curl patches. And like curl patches are like, just the generative type of sound. Like if you're saying like I make generative shit, but then you're not able to tell me you can make a curl patch, like, bro, it's not generative. It's like, but I use. Never mind. I'm not gonna. All right, so yeah, you can do a lot of crazy shit with this. So just when I move one of these knobs, it changes the modulation type. Say if I went and put a modulator in there, it'll start to move around the shape. I can do the same thing with all these. Start generating these shapes. So if we were trying to get into like visual synthesis, this is another place to start. You can do that same thing with any of these. So this has FM. I can modulate that. Let's patch that in to let's triangle wave. So that looks pretty crazy. I wonder what that sounds like now, because I can patch this new signal out. So it looks crazy. This interface looks crazy. All right. So what am I looking at when I look at this shit? And what am I looking at when I look at any module? What am I looking for? Because that's a really good thing to define when like opening up a crazy fucking module like this. Because if you're not able to say this is an output, this is an input, then you're kind of lost. So this is the output right here, and it says out right on the bottom. And if bring this down, you can kind of see it a little bit easier. So output all right here. So all these X and Y values, you know, this is like X times itself, X times these new shapes, can skew. So this is all types of like draw functions. So like if you're trying to get into like visual synthesis, you can send all these different X and Y values to map these like really crazy shapes. Like you can send this exact shape that it's generating right now because it has this amount of output. So what you need to know though is that these are outputs. They're somewhat random in general. So if I go and patch from any of these things, it's going to sound pretty interesting. So I'm going to try to get Alright, so I can start modulating more stuff in here and get it to sound like pretty crazy. So, you know, these are some places to start when like getting into modular synthesis, or just thinking about, you know, kind of like the big picture when like getting stuff to work in synthland, you know, and like also like building some sounds. So if you want to get random and crazy with it, the way like a drone sound can get, because this is not like me making a drone right now, this is me explaining how an LFO works and the extent of LFOs. So I want to kind of like just apply it right now. Alright, so I have that crazy sound building right now. I'm going to add like some processing, because this is part of like the patch. This is part of every synth that you have that's like a paid synth. You're not going to get a reverb with operator, but it's enabled synth for sure. So you can definitely include that as part of your sound design. So I'm going to put a reverb in here. And these are versions of clouds, alt versions. I'm going to go with plateau, because plateau is really consistent and sounds pretty good. So I'm going to patch it in the chain here. I'm actually going to bring this opacity up so people can actually see the cables. Patch these right here. So now I got a stereo thing, left and right. I'm actually going to get some VU metering too. Let's patch that. So it's signal flow. Alright, so I just wanted to add some reverb to give it space, pull down the octave range of this, and I'm just having to kind of move around. You know, I'm not really doing anything too crazy right now. So I do want it to get a little bit crazy though. So I'm going to speed up this trigger module here. So now it's just spitting out these like triggers. I'm going to send that to this ADSR here. Let's organize this a little bit. So this is my main filter. Really basic patch right now. So all this is just modulation. This is no part of the sound. Only these guys are. So I want to get something to control the speed because it's so fast. So this is kind of like an intro to a curl right now. So I'm going to get another LFO, and let's actually use this one. That would actually be cool. So I'm going to use this guy. Okay, but first, and this goes back into, whoops, I don't want to feed that back, the VCA stuff. So I'm going to actually open up Audible Instruments right now, just for that, get veils out. Well, actually, I'm going to get blinds. So blinds, I'm going to go with bipolar. So I can go plus or minus values when I send a signal and filter it through here. So this is really good, so I can go and scale a value that's going into something that's kind of weird. So you see that it's slowing down now. So it's going backwards now, this modulator. And so now it should speed up. So now that's the beginning of the curl patch. To be able to send an envelope, speed it up, and slow it down. So now if I was able to change this rhythm a little bit more, make it longer, make it shorter, something needs to change with this BPM LFO, because this is kind of my core modulator. Everything kind of revolves around this now because it's changing the speed, and they're all sunk to this. So these will be the main kind of like first order modulators now. And these are all second order. These are not really important. Those are just coming in secondhand in order to make these different now. So now when we're talking about real stuff in line, my filter right here, I have a reverb, and then my scope. I'm actually going to get info from here, and then I'm going to get info from here. So I can send two types of information there. Yeah, we deep in it, fam. Alright, so I'm going to get a little limiter in here. Bogue Audio, another free thing. Yeah, go into here. This has a ton of stuff, including the pitch thing too, and that also tells you the actual pitch. But I really like Bogue Audio's shit. It's really good. A limiter. Patch that right here. Get that shit under control a little bit. Alright, so now you get this kind of in an audible range here. You can also trigger this scope. So it reads every single incoming signal. Alright, so I'm gonna take this FM out now and put something else in here. I'm actually gonna get another oscillator rolling. Alright, so I got this really fine micro envelope in here. You know, like, I was gonna make some basic sounds, but, you know, I just can't get myself to do that. You know, because, like, I don't think you're dumb, you know? I think there's enough of that shit out there, and I think you're smart enough to have already seen it. So, I'm going to show you something that's, like, really useful, and then also requires all that, like, baseline knowledge for you to, like, understand and get this shit rolling. Yeah, so, I'm going to get another oscillator here. So, I kind of want something with, like, some type of good FM input, so I might use this. Actually, you know what? I'm going to go back to 21 kilohertz. I'm going to use Tachyon Entangler. I really like this one. And I actually have a bunch of patches where I'm using Black Hole as well. Black Hole is another one that I really like. I'm going to grab this. Let's get some visualizers going. You're just spinning now. Oh, we got it. Spinning. This is a little visualizer. It's a little like raver stick. Alright, so I'm just gonna keep that going. That's like moral support, like the Fruity Dancer. Oh, now it's like a lightsaber. So it's just like a guy like in pitch black who just like going ham, doing backflips. Just like fuck. Alright, so let's keep moving forward. Alright, so I'm going to kind of wrangle this in a little bit more. Alright, so this is a really cool VCA that allows you to do like a lot of cross modulation. I use it for a lot of like really crazy reeds patches and stuff. Nothing I've done on stream yet though. Like none of this stuff is stuff I've done on stream either. I'm surprised it's working so well. Actually, I'm not surprised. I'm just happy it is. I'm just happy it is. That's a better way to put it. Just make it in the back there, so it's not just so distracting. Probably pipe that out somehow too. Okay, so I've synced this up to the same pitch that I'm modulating these guys with. So this is my kind of like brain of everything. So keep that in mind again. I'm gonna keep on saying that kind of stuff. Like every video, if you're gonna be following along, you know, you definitely gonna learn some shit because I'm gonna say the same thing over and over. You know, which is like, this is the brain. These are my first order modulators. This is where everything is linked back to. And why is that important for you to like think about and keep in mind? Because a lot of people I know that are trying to get into modular synthesis don't know how to wrangle in a patch and think it's too complex. So, you know, if you're just thinking about like this, it shouldn't be that complex. They're just hooked up to a bunch of random things. Like somebody walking into this is like, what am I looking at? And I'm sure some people are. But, you know, it's really just me hooking things into things that need pitch, things that need gate, you know, things that are going to be moving around, things that need pitch and gate. Things are going to modulate, those first order modulators that change the sound at its core level. So if you know how to control the sound at its core level, then you can make really interesting environments. You know, and if you want to be like a Richard Devine, you know, one of his like chosen few one day, because, you know, convinced Jehovah was talking about Richard Devine. He's gonna come back, gonna take us all. Just kidding. Okay, so I got this like weird crowd thing going on right now. I'm gonna actually send this out again. to this decay size. And so now I'm sending it from this guy right here. So this will cascade outputs or mirror outputs. But once I patch it in here, it breaks the patch for the rest. Should be the way it works. If I patch anything out again, let's see if it's still able to modulate that. Oh, it still works. Alright, so it'll break the normal if you do patch something in right here. But, alright, so yeah, I'm going to scale this decay now with, let's see, the input was from the BPM LFO, which is moving super slow. And they also have another one, it's Frozen Wasteland. They also have like a super huge tap delay called Portland Weather. It's super cool. It's a granular filter. And then Mr. Blue Sky. That's a filter bank vocoder. And then this is a slew limiter, logic filter, function generator, Drunken Rampage. This is pretty much maths. Yeah, so they have another one in here called the Everlasting, no, not the Everlasting Ghost, Seriously Slow LFO right here. So this one can go for minutes, hours, days, weeks, or months. So that's its scale. So if this is the lowest LFO. This is the slowest LFO. If there was a scale from 1 to slow, this is the slowest. I'll just keep a patch going for months and have it modulate one time for like 1 month. No, fuck it. 1 year. 12 at months. Just come back and see like, all right guys, we're halfway through the LFO. Have a huge party. It'll just have its own like Twitch channel, a live feed on Instagram. But yeah, this one's cool. Minutes, minutes or maybe an hour. I've never used it more than that, but minutes is cool because it goes super slow. But yeah, okay, so I'm gonna have that modulate the decay time. So like when it gets faster, it opens up the decay, so it's not just a small impulse the whole time. So I'm going to switch the range now. I'm going to put it up for 5 octaves or whatever. This thing's super dope. What is this one? Oh, the Wicked Full Scope Black Edition. Wicked with a Q, no CK. That's how dope it is. They said fuck CK. Like fuck Louis CK. And they're going with the Q. They're taking a stand against Louis CK by not using CK in that. Alright, so I'm going to get this guy too, and I'm going to send it here. Cool, cool. Okay, so like I've already been doing, chill, bro. So modulating pitch on all these guys. So that's another first order modulator. See all these cables hooked up now. And this is like, you know, eventually you should be able to like think out something like this where it's not really that much that I'm doing. I'm not even really doing that much with this stuff. This is not even hooked up to anything. It's just there to look cool and look pretty, you know. It's kind of like, you know, having fish in general. It's like, what's their function? It's like, at least cats like used to like clean stuff up, like rats and stuff. What does a fish do? It gives you constant entertainment. That's what it does. So that's what this is doing, just constantly entertaining me. All right, so I want to filter this information, kind of like at the core of what I was just talking about. So again, back to the VCAs in here, and we're going to go to audible instruments again, and gonna actually use veils on this one. Okay, so I could go into this one. I'm not gonna actually use that one today. That's a little too much. I'm not gonna talk about crazy shit. This should just be just one-to-one kind of things. So, you know, remember, core of everything, I'm modulating pitch and gate, the speed at which they are being generated over time. So I'm modulating that, and I just patch that in right here. So back to the beginning of the video, if you're like confused, you know, I talked exactly about that. You know, so there was a flow of logic here, seemingly random, but, you know, one thing after another. So I want to take this pitch information, say the one that's going into my oscillators. So this already has my scale quantizer. I'm going to patch that in right here. So now all these outputs are modulating. So I'm just going to break that here, patch that in, and then I'm going to intercept that with another modulator. So I have these other two X's that I'm not really using for anything besides moving these other two Lisa Jew roulette LFOs around. So I'm going to take one of these outputs. So note how there's already something there. So that might look hard to plug into. So if you want to go into this part, which this is how to modulate this knob. So this actual knob has a modulator input. And so what you have to do, if it's already patched somewhere, this is why VCV rack is an infinite, because I can just go and patch it like this. So I have to go from the destination to the source. That's from the destination to the source. So now I'm intercepting this pitch information, which is scaled right here, and I'm modulating it with this guy. So I could do that, or I could put a randomizer in there. So some type of LFO that gives me a random value. So that's not something too crazy, you know? Just give me something random. Let's see. Alright, so what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to get an oscillator. So I want to get some type of noise oscillator, some type of noise generator. So I actually have this K oscillator in here already. That's why tachyon entangler is cool, because it has these chaos outputs and these chaos modulators. Alright, so I'm going to modulate this square wave with a little bit of chaos. So I'm actually going to go to A instead of B. I'm going to pull that down. So chaos A. I'm going to pull this octave down way low. I'm going to modulate that. And so now it's just modulating this pitch. I can do the same thing here. So now just do it on its own little channel. So if I patch it from here, that means that this one channel is just filtering this input and sending it here. Allows me to do another set of that right here, because I patched into this input. So also notice that these pop up when I patch it in here. So this is like advanced routing and stuff I want to talk about when I talk about mixing and like what audio like engineering fundamentals kind of stuff. But normally means that when I patch into one input, it automatically goes into another input. And so in order to break that chain, I need to patch into it. So again, back here, I can patch into right here. Actually, no, that's a little bit too insane. Actually, I was thinking patching this pitch, but no. Okay, so I'm just going to start there. And I can actually pull this oscillator down to a lower value by intercepting its pitch. Say maybe pitching this around with this, and then pulling this down a couple octaves. So, if you're a little bit lost, or, you're trying to like wrap your head around the logic here, it's literally just me filtering pitch information. That's all I'm trying to do. And I'm trying to make it somewhat random, because I want it to move around and keep on being generative for a while. And I'm only using these 3 oscillators and 1 filter. So imagine like if I decided to maximize this element on top of this element. So this is like literally baseline stuff if you really want to understand modular. And understanding modular is, something that is really beneficial. Alright, so now it's hitting all these like random kind of pitches here, as well as giving me this decay modulation. Alright, so these are pretty high right now. I'm going to pull this down. So this has FM inputs as well, linear phase and exponential phase, but I'm going to talk about what that means. It means FM. Alright, so that really should be like the kind of focus when you start a patch is what is your core elements? Where's your brain at? So my brain is this random sampler, which is marbles, which in Ableton is the DAW. That's the sequencer. That's what a DAW is. A DAW is a big glorified sequencer with a lot of functions. So I'm filtering that information out, sending it to all these different modules. The ones making sound are really basic. Just the basic comes with VCV rack oscillators. And then a couple of these other ones for functions I was just talking about. The K oscillator has FM input. So I took all that pitch information from this right here, sent it into these filters. So this is an amp. And then I used it to combine signals. So I used this VCA to combine this tachyon entangler randomizer to filter pitch information going into pretty much all my oscillators, except this one. So that's how I randomize the pitch. Then we got the other core first order modulator, which is envelope, buried deep in the cables. Let me just take all those out so it looks less threatening. So I have my VCF right here, and that's hooked up directly to my envelope. And that's the only thing my envelope is modulating. So when I highlight this, I can see everything that's being patched in here. So ADSR is being modulated by this input, and that's coming from my BPM LFO. Remember, back to the brain, what's my sequencer? It's this. Where's my clock? It's right here. So that's all patched to the BPM LFO. That's moving really slow. Not only is that modulating my decay size, but it's also modulating the speed of my rate here. Alright, so a lot of stuff going on in this patch, but also this kind of covers a lot of the things I was talking about in my little outline here. In my little outline here, you just go check out my outline. I'll be listing shit up in this shit, man. I'll be out here listing shit up in the quarantine. I'll be up here listing. Alright, so I don't want to bog you guys down too much more, but I definitely am going to talk a little bit more about this stuff, and I'm going to be going in depth on some hardcore sound design. But for now, what I want y'all to be doing is applying shit and kind of working off what I'm talking about and kind of running off of some of my example, but not doing what I'm just working for you kind of doing, I don't want to just tell you, this is how to make this patch. Moody Good uses this synth and this limiter. I'm not just going to tell you that day one. I can't just tell you what Moody Good does to his masters day one. Because that's just too much. We're getting to that part. We're getting to Moody Good 101. How to maximize your LUFS and not give a fuck while doing it. So I want you guys to run off of some of this, direction here. So I'm saying C0 to C2. That's the range in which the MIDI is being modulated. So this is really crucial when you're designing a patch because this kind of changes the sound. So when you're playing a sound at C0, it's not going to be really good for a lead because you're going to play it at that range. And normally what happens when you design a sound around C0, because you can definitely do it, is just going to be so shrill and high end, heavy because, you're really making a lot of movement or whatever at a low pitch. That just really crazy. Yeah, but I also kind of say like how to make kind of like feed me kind of leads. So this is kind of the recipe for a feed me lead, or like haywire or whatever you're trying to do with like some type of lead. Leads are not very common nowadays. It's more about like little donks here and there, little donks and chords. So stab leads are probably the most common as well. That's what I mean by donks. So stab leads, similar to the pluck bass, short envelope. Definitely hit FM, wavetable modulation, hence the donk. This is the donk right here, try FM. So I consider donk kind of a lead. And when I'm making a donk for a house tune, I'm definitely just kind of like working around overtones, and I just want to make it sound cool. I'm not going to really worry about so much sub in there because I'm just going to fill that sub range in. So then chords on top of that. This is really simple. Sawtooth chords, definitely like try some of this shit out. It's like Feature Bass 101 right here. So same kind of like things here. You can modulate vibrato to the pitch. You can add wavetable to it, stack samples. But yeah, so you just kind of make them wobble, patching the same things. Excuse the typo here. I'm sure you can fill in the E that I missed. So you patch LFO to the amp and the filter, and that'll really control the sound. It's really common for all Feature Bass shit. And so that's kind of like the auto pan to your whatever. So auto pan's really easy for that too. I use a lot of auto pan. So pads, this should also be pretty simple, and you guys can just load up patches too and check those out, try to dissect them. If you have questions about stuff, definitely hit me up. Just you can go into your cymatics, whatever, and then try to dissect something and, send that back and hit me up. Let me know what you think about some kind of thing. But yeah, so you guys should definitely like understand shit and just kind of like heed my warnings about things, because it's like I've just been doing this shit for a while and I just kind of know how to like maximize my productivity. And I'm a very much by the seat of my pants kind of person. While it may seem like I'm super analytical because I'm doing all this shit and I just like, this is the way I think, I don't like to use all this directly. This is just like in the background. All this shit is just sitting in the background and allowing me to be random when I'm doing stuff, but it allows me just to fly through it. It's kind of like, skateboarding. You can't just go and like know how to fucking do a hard flip because you're going to cut your ball sack open. I've seen that shit a bunch of times. Probably the most crazy thing out of all these is drums. So definitely I'm gonna go into like super in depth on making drums, so I didn't want to like bog down this like lesson here with me just sitting around making drums, because this you can get really cool with. But yeah, here are just some like guidelines of where to start. So basic kick, basic snare. When I'm talking about micro transients too, I'm saying like super short attack, super short decay, like millisecond amounts. If you need a scale on which to find the exact transient length, just go look at a kick sample and look how long it is, and then make your pitch envelope kind of that long. I can give you an example really quick too. It's actually decent. Okay, so you see how this waveform develops? This is sustain. This is a consistent waveform, but it gets faster right here. So if I wanted to measure how long to make my pitch envelope, I would measure this little section where it gets faster, because this is sustain. This is after the pitch envelope has finished and now it's holding this sine wave that's been clipped. and that is for approximately 15 milliseconds, around there. 15 to 20 milliseconds. Yeah, or you're so wrong, bro. You acting a fool right now, being that wrong up in the chat, boy. Shit, boy. You acting a fool, man. Get up out of here, man. You fucking done, boy. Alright. And then finally, it's the last thing. Homework and effects. So, definitely try some of this shit. And your homework is trying some of this shit. So if you don't try some of this shit, you don't get a grade, you fail, and you're excommunicated. That's just how it goes. That's the only way this will work. So make one patch from each of these examples. Written examples, but I just want it to be a bass, lead, chord, pad, drum, effects. Doesn't have to be following exactly along to it. Make your best attempt at whatever, you know. I'm sure you'll have a lot of basses, but I'm curious to hear what y'all have for chords and drums, maybe even effects. Because this is the strong point. This is the plethora, the overabundance of shit. This is like if you're going off of frequent bass gorilla and culprit masterclasses alone. This is that crowd right here. So I'm expecting to hear some dope shit from y'all. But yeah, effects, really simple. So like if you're confused about effects, just start from noise. Start with the bandpass, create a riser, noise or pitch oscillator, which means just like a free running oscillator, doesn't need to be anything. And no, this doesn't need to be in VCV Rack. You can send me in a bunch of different, you can send me 5 different examples, you know. Say if you didn't want to like send me patches, you can send me examples of audio clips, and that's the optional part of your homework and shit. You know, so 5 resamples. Impact sound, also another easy one. Make a kick, put it in a reverb, add saturation, compression, and then stack samples. Just drop a bunch of random samples in there. So, Foley shit, glass breaking, whatever. So, last one, whoosh effects. And if you're trying to get into professional sound design, this is the most applicable. Most of my like sound design to picture stuff is a lot of whoosh effects because it's like the movement stuff. So, much like a riser, only bandpass. Run noise through the bandpass. Run through delay and reverb processing. We're going to talk about proximity effects a little bit, but pretty much what proximity effect means is that when something's close to you, it's loud. When something's far away, it's quiet. And then there's also reverb. So if it's far away, there's reverb. If it's up close, there's less. If it goes left to right fast, there's pitch modulation. So, if anybody has the Waves plugins, or can get your hands on the Waves plugins, and want to make some crazy shit like that, get Waves, because Waves actually has like a hidden sound design gem called Doppler. And that only does proximity effect. So modulates pan, pitch, this convolution, air dampening, and reverb time. And it's all 192. So it's super high quality, even though it looks like shit. Alright, so that's it. I gotta like drink some water before I cough out a hunk of sand. But yeah, so like do your homework and don't fail. Don't fail the quiz. The quiz I'm about to like send out to y'all. And I'm just gonna link it tomorrow. the quiz for Sampler 101 or Sampling 101, because that's, you know, pretty important. So you guys should be following along in that shit. Sampling is probably going to be the most fun shit for y'all, you know, most applicable. So you can definitely, you know, use all this stuff just from the 101 stages. It's going to be, like, I'm making it really broad right now and covering a lot of shit. It's a lot of theory and actual, you know, beneficial knowledge. Just so you can, like, digest all the hard stuff. Because it's going to just get harder. It's, you know, it's like, this is just synthesis too. You know, so to really get a grasp of all of it, you really do have to have, you know, kind of a comprehensive understanding. Or else you're just kind of like doing random shit, and that can get boring, you know, because you don't know where to go next because you're not really paying attention, and then you kind of get lost and disillusioned. And this is just for me. I don't like that. I don't like getting disillusioned because it sucks. So I like to keep myself fresh. And I like, you know, I've been through it. I've been a musician since I was 10 years old. So that's like 18 years. You know, so like coming through bass, I was like super good at bass. Like weird good. But I like plateaued, you know, and I like stopped really caring. And with synthesis, I found something that like didn't have that ceiling, kept on inspiring me. So that's why I do it. So anyways, hit me up if you have any questions. I'm gonna play some sound design, kind of lead y'all out. Yeah, thanks for coming through. Definitely, you know, all some interesting shit. I'm gonna get a camera soon too. I have like a couple cameras, but I also need like a light too because my room is super dark. So, like, it's not like super dark, just mood lighting. So you can't really see me in mood lighting. Alright.